Today we're going to learn about the second part of drawing angles. We know a lot about degrees and angles, but there is another unit of measure, just like when you talk about temperature. We're so familiar with Fahrenheit, but there's Kelvin and Celsius that are also scales of temperature. Well, there's another measurement of angles, and that is radian. And let me explain to you what a radian actually represents. First of all, it relates to a circle. And when a radius of a circle is 1, they call that a unit circle. And a unit circle in itself has a circumference. That all the way around the circle, the circumference formula is 2 pi times r. If you put a 1 in for r, then you find all the way around the circle is 2 pi. So they decided to make the radian measurement based on that instead of going around 360 degrees, we went around the distance 2 pi. Then 1 radian, the actual measurement, if you talked about 1 radian like 1 degree, 1 radian, is measured off so that when you look at the radius here being 1 each way, this arc across the side of the circle is also measured in 1. And that's how they came up with the name radian, because it's related to the radius. When the radius is 1, the arc of a radian is 1, and which is about 57 degrees. Now, we don't really use that measurement because we want everything to be in terms of pi, since the distance all the way around is 2 pi when the radius is 1. And just one other thing, 360 degrees is related to 2 pi because all the way around is 360 and all the way around is 2 pi. And that reduces to 180 over pi, which is also what 57 degrees divides out to give. Now, you'll notice that the axes are labeled by halves, because if it's all the way around is 2 and you divide it into 4 equal pieces, that means you go up by halves. And that's how you label your graph. And then down here at the bottom, I have given you some information about how it relates to alpha, beta, and gamma. Because alpha is between 0 and 2 pi, just like it was between 0 and 360. Negative angles are always less than 0 for beta. And your gamma angle has to be more than 2 pi, just like it had to be more than 360. And so radian is just another kind of measuring unit. And we will need to learn how to number our unit circle in radians. So let's switch to our unit circle picture and number it in radians. First, I need to get rid of this circle stuff I drew on here. Okay. So the first thing you need to know about dividing up your unit circle is that from 0 over to 180 has 12 pieces in your unit circle. And because it has 12 pieces, then that means you can divide that into 12 equal segments, like twelfths. And the bottom also is the same. It's in twelfths. So we're going to do this in pi over 12 measurements. Now again, you start with 0. There's no unit of measure on that 0 because radians, so we don't write radian next to it, although we can. And we're going to go by twelfths. So because the first line has to be 1/12, the next line is 2/12, and 2/12 reduces to pi over 6. The next one is 3/12, and 3/12 reduces to pi over 4. Then the next one is 4/12, and 4/12 reduces to pi over 3. The next one is 5/12, which doesn't reduce. The next one is 6/12, which is pi over 2. So you just keep adding up 1/12 every time, and if it reduces, you reduce it. So 7/12 doesn't reduce. 8 over 12 reduces to 2 pi over 3. 9 over 12 reduces to 3/4 pi. 10 over 12 reduces to 5 pi over 6. 11 pi over 12. And then 12/12 is pi. So you just keep going around your unit circle, adding up your 12ths. So 13 twelfths, 14 twelfths is 7 pi over 6, 15 twelfths is 5 pi over 4, and the next one is going to be 4 pi over 3, and let's see, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 pi over 12, 18 pi over 12 is 3 pi over 2, 19 pi over 12, 5 pi over 3, 7 pi over 6, oh no, that's not right, 7 pi over 4, and this is 11 pi over 6, and this one is 23 pi over 12, and this one is 2 pi because 24 over 12 reduces to 2. So that's how you number your unit circle. You just go up by 1/12 each time and then reduce your fractions. Notice that the ones that don't reduce are on those lines that I drew in that were extra. All the others do reduce. So now, we're looking for, whoop, I hit the wrong one. We're looking for how to draw with radians. Alright, so let's look at how you would do this. So first you number it with 0 and 2 pi. Then you put pi over 2 at the top. Pi, 3 pi over 2, because you're going by halves when you go around on the x-axis. Because again, remember, if your radius is 1, the distance all the way around the circle is 2 pi, because that's circumference. Then you go look at your unit circle to see where pi over 6 is. Pi over 6 is in the same place as 30 degrees. So you draw your 30-degree angle. You still put your arc mark in there just like you did before. This is an alpha angle because it's less than going all the way around. It's positive. And it's in quadrant 1. Alright, let's try another one. We have 0 and 2 pi. Pi over 2. Pi. 3 pi over 2. We have 3 pi over 4 is the number we want to look up. 3 pi over 4 is in the middle of quadrant 2. So we draw our initial side. Well, and split the second quadrant. It opens up because it's a positive alpha angle of 3 pi over 4. And it's in quadrant 2. So these are done the same way. It's just you got to be a little bit more careful to think about where these fractions are, because 3/4 is not, it doesn't mean 3/4 around the circle. That would be at the bottom. It means in relation to 2 pi, where's 3/4. So now let's look at some beta angles. So with beta angles, you do the same thing you did before. You number them backwards, so negative 2 pi is down at the bottom, negative pi is over here on the left, and negative 3 pi over 2 is up at the top. To figure out where 5 pi over 3 is, you need to know where positive 5 pi over 3 is. So 5 pi over 3 is down here. Well, so that means I got to flip it, and it's going to be up here at the same place that 60 degrees is. So we'll draw in our 60-degree angle, but it's going to open around the opposite direction because it's a negative angle. And this is a beta angle of negative 5 pi over 3 in quadrant 1. Now when you look at your next one, that number's not on the unit circle. So that's a pretty good clue that this beta angle is going to spiral, because for this beta angle to be negative 33 pi over 4, 4 goes into 33 a lot more than 2 times, so it has to be a beta angle that is going to spiral. So we label our axes with our negative numbers. Now before we were adding 360 when the angle was negative. Now we're going to add 2 pi. In order to add 2 pi, we need a common denominator. So the common denominator is always going to have to match the original problem. So we're going to have to change this to 4s. So right now this is over 1. If I change this to a 4, the top's going to change to 8. So we're going to have 33 fourths plus 8 fourths. And that's going to come out to be negative 25 fourths. And we can add 8 again and get 25 fourths. And we can keep doing that. So that'll be 17 fourths. Then we can add 8 again, and that'll be negative 9 fourths. And then we can add 8 again, and that comes out negative pi over 4. So negative pi over 4 will be down here in quadrant 4, halfway, because positive pi over 4 is in quadrant 1. And we're going to spiral. I need to start that spiral over. I started over way too far. And as we spiral, we're going to spiral once, twice, 3, 4 times before we come back to that line. So we're going to open down and go once, twice, 3, 4 times, and then back to our terminal side. And you can see that you did 4 times because right here it crossed the x-axis 4 times. So you'll know you did it 4 times. And this ended up in quadrant 4. So now let's look at a gamma angle. And with our gamma angle, we're just going to do one of these. We'll do 10 pi over 3. It's very similar, except you number it in a positive direction. So we're going to take away 2 pi. Now, this time, 2 pi is going to have to change to thirds. So that's 6 pi. So if we take 10 minus 6, we get 4 pi over 3. And that's on the unit circle. It's down here in this quadrant, about 30 degrees from the bottom. I only had to do it one time, so I spiral once and come back to my terminal side. So I have a gamma angle of 10 pi over 3 with quadrant 3. So now you can do the second set of questions in Canvas under 5.1, drawing the angles for 7 through 12. So go ahead and do that assignment, and that will get you caught up through the first 2 days of class.